Good afternoon, Chairman Fields and members of the committee. My name is Tori Wenger, and I'm an attorney with the Legal Defense Fund and a very proud representative of the Robinson plaintiffs, many of whom are here today.
Thank you very much. I have just a few questions, Senator Price. I'm familiar with this map because it's similar to the one that we had in the last redistricting session. In terms of splits, this map splits 11 parishes, is that correct?
That's correct.
And the present congressional plan that we have that members are running under today splits 15 parishes?
That's correct.
So this map splits less parishes than the present map.
Correct.
The deviation, which is another important factor, your deviations are in line. I think your highest deviation in this plan is minus 43. Is that correct?
I believe the statistic I have for the deviation is 67. So essentially 67 people between the lowest populated district and the highest populated district. Just for a point of context, the bill that originated, or the version of the map that was put in comparison in our record, in the case, compared to the enacted map at the time had 61 for the deviation. The difference here, the slight adjustments that have been made between the map that's been in the record before the courts and that had several versions that have been before this legislature before, your predecessors, that map has just been updated to reflect precinct changes in the past year or two or three, wherever we're at now. So this has a deviation of 67. The enacted plan has one of 65. In its original form, we had a deviation of 61, but all essentially trying to get as close to that one person, one vote principle.
All right, so your overall range is 67. And how does that compare to the map that's enacted today?
That is just within 2 people.
Lastly, in terms of Senate Bill 4, it creates 2 majority-minority districts.
Yes.
One in District 2, which is the present minority district. And that voter registration is 52.9. Voter registration.
Voter registration.
The map provides us with multiple different statistics. There's voter registration numbers. There's also the black voting age population, essentially the population of Louisianians from one race or another who are above the age of 18, so qualified to vote whether they're registered or not.
So I think it's 52.9 in voter registration.
Yeah, registered black.
Registered
Yes.
black. And then population is 53.5.
The total population, is that what you're referring to?
Yes, ma'am.
That'd be on another page.
53.5, that's correct.
And so do you,
Black population.
all right, and now let me go to District 5. You have a voter registration of 53.4,
Yeah.
That's correct.
53.479.
and then you have a population of 54.6.
Yes.
Is that correct?
That is correct.
So my only question is, do you think that this complies with any court order that this legislature is under today?
I certainly do think that it complies with the court order, Senator Fields. We've looked at this map and we've studied it, and we based on what the court ordered, and that's why we followed it the way it is. It definitely meets, we think it meets the court order.
All right, thank you, Senator. I have no other questions. I'm now Senator Carter for a question.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Senator Duplessis. Thank you, Senator Price, and thank you to the Legal Defense Fund for not just your work on this legislation, and especially to the Legal Defense Fund for helping get us to this point of having a court order and having us into session to do this important work. I just want to, I believe Senator Fields, the chairman, asked most of my questions, but I just want to ask a couple of questions to make sure. The map that you propose, it creates 2 African-American majority districts in the state of Louisiana?
It creates 2 minority-majority districts, yes, sir.
And they both perform as 2, and you're nodding, but yes.
Yes, that's correct.
And when I say perform, what does that mean for those who actually run I'm looking at you, the Legal Defense Fund. When we hear that, does it perform as an African-American district? What does that mean? Is that calculated any sort of way? Is it analyzed any sort of way? And you can help us explain how that's done.
Absolutely. So we have a very thorough record on this. In the court, we had a PhD, Dr. Lisa Hanley, who has essentially gone and she's recompiled the results of prior elections and superimposed those on the districts that we have here. So she was able to analyze 15 elections at that primary stage and then 9 elections where you're looking at the outcomes when you're putting the candidates of choice here in the elections that she analyzed, Black candidates, but truly we're looking at who is the candidate of choice of the voters, of Black voters here, who we represent, in contest with the candidate of choice of white voters here, white candidates as well. So in 15 primary elections and 9 runoffs, she was able to analyze what the results would be on our district lines. In District 2, the current Black majority district, represented by Congressman Carter, in these elections, in all of the 24 that she analyzed, the candidate of choice of Black voters was elected 100% of the time. So 24 out of 24 elections, if you were using these district lines and looking at the outcome of those elections that have happened. So many of these are statewide elections, looking at Secretary of State or governor or other offices where we have votes for each and every precinct within the configuration of the districts as they've been drawn here, 100% of the time.
And let me pause you. That's 100% of the time for
100%.
For District 2, which
For
is
District 2,
which
correct.
is the current congressional.
Correct, as reconfigured here, which, yes, it will bring down the Black population. It'll look different than the district that it's drawn as right now. But maintaining that majority Black population, not only as a total population or a registered voter population, which were the metrics presented before, but the Black voting age population, which the court is often looking to. That's the primary metric we're using. Here we have a Black voting age population above 50%, lower than its current percentage, but still 100% of the time on those elections, Black voters were able to see the candidate that they want win.
And let me ask you, so 100% of the time performance for District 2.
Correct.
The other district that's created would be District 5, the
Correct.
other African-American majority seat. Did you run the performance numbers on that one as well?
We certainly did. We did for all 6 districts, but let me talk about District 5, the real one in question here. In the 15 primary elections here, 86.7% of the time, Black voters saw their candidate of choice succeed. Looking to the later elections between in 2 candidate contests, 77.8% of the time, Black voters were seeing their candidate of choice succeed. I'll note that once you get to that runoff scenario, those 9 elections, in the remaining of the districts, you're very rarely, if ever, seeing Black voters have their candidates of choice elected. But in District 5, an opportunity is created here that just has not been recorded in recent history and certainly is not provided under the currently enacted map.
Thank you. Thank you for your questions. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Senator. Senator Jenkins.
All right, thank you, Mr. Chairman. And let me start off also by just expressing my appreciation for all the hard work that has gone into this effort. I said in my opening comments, well, my introduction, that I served in House and Governmental Affairs, so I was very much a part of the redistricting process over there. I served with Senator Duplessis, who was Vice Chair of our House and Governmental Affairs Committee, and certainly want to salute you, sir, on your leadership once again. We touched upon it somewhat, but I just want, just for the record, if we could, can you expand a little bit on the motivating factors behind this particular map?
Certainly. So I can speak from the perspective of the litigation, and again, where the map was a teeny tiny bit different because this one has been adjusted for precinct lines and updates since our phases of litigation when this map was introduced jointly by parties involved. But we had our incredible map drawer, Tony Fairfax, who's been credited by courts for decades now, testify before the district court about his process of drawing a map. And he spoke to balancing principles, to really looking at Joint Rule 21, the rules of the game that the legislature here enacted, but also what courts have sustained for decades now. We really look at the rubric provided by Thornburg v. Jingles, which was upheld in Allen v. Milligan just last year, the Alabama case, very analogous to this one before the Supreme Court and argued by my colleagues at LDF. So he was able to provide in his analysis, and this is all in the public record, and I can provide it or you can find it there, a comparison on 8 of the quantitative measures for redistricting that really put in Joint Rule 21 into numeric measures so that you can see a side-by-side of this map compared to the enacted map or any of the other maps that were presented or argued either as bills or amendments during prior redistricting sessions or in the session that we were reconvened for today. So we can first talk about population deviation. At the time that Mr. Fairfax was working on this map, we spoke to this earlier, he was able to achieve a deviation of only 61 people. HB1 had a deviation of 65. Both maps were able to comply with the principle of geographic contiguity. That's the idea that you don't have one pocket of a district over here and the other pocket over here. Everything is connected by land or waterway. You can get from one point in a district to the other without needing to go through another district. Both were successful on that, but he was ensuring that he was complying with that principle. Parish splits is a huge one here, and my colleague Jared spoke to it earlier. Mr. Fairfax was able to get parish splits down to 11. We've seen very few bills here or in other phases of the process that were able to keep so many parishes whole. And in Louisiana, that's a huge deal. If you do anything on elections, voter registration, and I know each one of y'all do because you have to run for office, that's the level at which elections are administered. Ballots are often built at that level, but you also see school boards, administration, all these other elements of civic and public life really codified around that parish level. So keeping parishes whole was a huge guiding principle here, but again, balanced with all of these other dynamics. In comparison, again, HB1 split 15 parishes. VTD splits, that's a fancy census way of saying precinct splits. This legislature is very committed to making sure that number is 0. Both maps achieved that. Census place split, so that's another fancy term for municipal splits, but also accounting for unincorporated areas. It's really what's your hometown, and is it encompassed in one district or cut up into multiple? Mr. Fairfax was able to get it down to 27 splits in comparison to HB1, the enacted map's 32. Landmark splits, so this is where we're talking about airports, cemeteries, parks, schools, churches. How many times are they sliced and diced into multiple different districts? Mr. Fairfax had it at 58, same number for HB1. Now let's get into compactness. The layman's way of analyzing compactness is something very scientific called the eyeball test. How does it look? Do the district lines look silly? Do they look like they have a bunch of, tendrils going in one direction or another? Just illogical if you're taking any kind of rivers or other things that may also, wind and bend out of the equation. What's that eyeball test? You can run the eyeball test for yourself. If I was offering my opinion here, I would say that our map looks much more compact than the enacted map that voters are participating on to this day and represented under right now. But we also have some math to back that up. And specifically, Mr. Fairfax was looking at 3 tests, which again, my colleague mentioned earlier. The REOC test, which calculates the ratio of district area to the smallest circle containing the district. So draw the district and try to have a circle encompass it. You can run some numbers to see what that ratio is. You have the convex hull test, which determines the ratio of the area of the district to the convex hull area of the district. And then finally, the Polsby-Popper test, which calculates the ratio of the same area of the district to the area of a circle with the same perimeter. So here, your goal is to get as close to 1 as possible. And I'll give you the numbers for Mr. Fairfax's map and then the enacted one. He was able to get to a compactness score of 0.4, 0.2, and 0.7 compared to HB1's 0.37, 0.14, and 0.62. In easiest terms, this map that we're presenting here today beats the enacted map and many of the others that it was up against throughout the multifold processes we've been before the legislature during. It outperforms on every measure. So compactness is another check in favor of this bill. And then finally, fracking, which I know can mean different things in different contexts. But here, fracking is whether or not discontiguous parts of a district are, or of a parish are populating the district. So essentially, how are things being sliced and diced? Here, Mr. Fairfax was able to get the number down to 12, again, lower the better, versus the enacted plan at 17. So that is 8 quantitative measures, where at worst, this map is exactly the same as the enacted map, and at best, it is well outperforming it. But on one measure, which is listed towards the top, if not at the top, of Joint Rule 21, and a guiding principle for how redistricting comes into play is compliance with federal and state law. And one of those federal laws is the Voting Rights Act of 1965, including Section 2, and including the promise that Black voters, where there's an opportunity to create a second Black majority district or any additional majority districts that give Black voters an opportunity to elect their candidate of choice, where it is possible, where number 1, and this is the Jingles test, it's possible to draw a map because that population lives geographically compactly enough to be able to draw the district. So again, this is not about just some ratio. It's not because Black voters are 1/3 of the state that they inherently get another Black majority district. It's because of where they live. It's because we've seen multiple maps presented here in these chambers and in front of the courts that showed it's possible, it's easy, and in fact, you can do it better and comply with all of these other measures better whilst doing that than passing the map that y'all have enacted here and that voters are operating under today. So number 1, is it possible? Number 2, is it necessary? The Voting Rights Act looks to voting behaviors. It's asking in the second part of that Jingles test, Jingle 2, if the Black voters are voting cohesively, if they really have a voting bloc and shared interests and community and needs based off of legacies of discrimination, but also contemporary realities. And then 2, are white voters, the majority population, voting in the opposite direction. So unless you create a geographic majority, Black voters, or whatever the minority population is, are just not going to see their candidates of choice elected. Those conditions exist here. This record is replete with examples, including ones filed finally from across the aisle here, that show it's possible to create another Black majority district. And we know from Dr. Lisa Hanley's analysis and other record evidence before the courts that it is necessary because of patterns of racially polarized voting in this state. If those elements weren't here, we wouldn't be in this place. There's a future where maybe those elements subside, where the state is more integrated, where the politics are less divided by race. We are not there yet, so we are in this situation. And so what we have here is a map that complies with the Voting Rights Act of 1965, that has withstood that test of Jingles, which has now been in play whilst we had to see that test sustained through Allen v. Milligan and the Supreme Court of the United States. All of these factors bring us to today and bring us to this map, which is well vetted by the courts and which a lot of folks in this room have been really excited about for many years now. So I'll leave it at that. But the point is, this map complies with the Voting Rights Act, and we hope that you can get on board with it.